You and I, we we lost touch for a little while when you were in New York, but like, I mean, we still kept it, but like it wasn't like as active. But when you came back to the area, it's like, okay, no, we're more active in reaching out to each other and talking, and you know, I have more people in my life who have now made me very conscious about, you know, looking at, you know, privilege that I have versus very marginalized communities that most of my friends are now part of, you know, people of color, people who are gay, bi, trans, etc. That, you know, all of these groups that have had, you know, so many setbacks in recent years in terms of, you know, just basic care needs, that's like, well, crap, what can I do about it? And that was one of the things that you and I were talking about in the pre-interview. Is like, you know, I always kind of went through it thinking I'm a white guy. I'm a middle class cisgender white guy. I should be the peak of, but like I have very little real power. And growing up, it was like I should let the people who are in the marginalized communities do the speaking and just do what I can to support them. And I guess my big thing is, like, in recent years, I have no idea how to better support these communities other than, you know, donating time and money where I can. But like that even feels like a drop in the bucket sometimes. So like it's one of the things that I wanted to do with it is like what can be done, you know. I made this joke in the pre-interviews, I'm very much a pointed, you know, instrument to point me in the direction in which I can carve something out with a sword if I have to. Like, what, show me where I can go and what I can do, because I don't I don't have the experiences. I don't have the I don't have the experiences you've had, so I don't know where to begin even. And like I look around and like you and I talk, we had the discussion about, you know, the previous election, just watching that unfold. It's like you think we take a step forward, and it's like, oh no, we are taking a couple of steps back, and now it's even worse. It's like, okay, now I definitely have no idea how to. It's like, so that's I would say that's pretty much my journey of racial evolution, realizing that we're not a post-racial society like the 90s cartoons wanted us to believe, or the 90s, you know, children's media wanted us to believe. And very much we are, like I said, a dumpster fire.
You can say it. You can say what we actually are.
what I mean, I would say dumpster fire. Like
Yeah, but let's give it a shot. You know, like you were like, I thought we were post-racial, and then
we are still, yeah, there's still a very racial component. There's still too many racists who are just comfortable being outright racist, comfortable being outspoken racist. I will say I have also noticed that there are people who are unintentionally racist, and I'm guilty of that myself. For the long, this is a story of, you know, me growing and learning as a person. Um, it's terrible. I didn't know that gypsy was an offensive term for the longest time. It wasn't until I was working with a young woman in retail that we were having a conversation about it, because she was discussing something, and I don't even remember the context now. It's been so long. And the only thing that really sticks out in my mind is just the realization of that's bad. That is not something that you want to call someone of that descent. It was always used as a derogatory term. And learning that, and that I was in my 20s at that point. Like that was, I mean, granted that was still half my life ago at this point, but late enough in my life to where you'd think that that information would have been taught in some level of history. And like you and I, we had a lot of conversations about history, and you've met my dad, who's a huge history buff. Like none of the books that I'd read, none of the things that ever described that in a negative context. And so like I learned, oh no, that's bad. That is not something that you should call someone. It is very offensive to the cultures involved. and
and then you decided.
and then I like, well, I have to strike that from my dictionary. And then also the words that are associated with it. I didn't know gypped was related to that until having further conversations with this woman. And I'm like, because like there was a Family Guy joke that I never got at the time. There was a Family Guy joke that Peter was dressed as a Hasidic Jew and he was going to temple, and he was, hello Hebrews and Shebrews, and I got a great deal on a TV, but I ussed him down, and I never got that because I didn't know that Jude was a derogatory term for that, and so I was like, I have to learn to unlearn. So it's like, because previously I had used gypped. I never really heard Jude as a verb in that tense. But everyone's like, oh yeah, it's just a turn of phrase. Well, yes, but it's a turn of phrase that is heavily seated in racism.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean,
And I'm like, and the thing is, like, everyone that I knew who used it that did not know that either. It wasn't until I had a conversation with someone from that background that I knew that. And so, like,
I also learned it from someone with a relation to that background as well.
right? It's like, but you would imagine, because like, I'm almost 90% sure, like, I've heard that in like a Looney Tunes cartoon, which granted, I get that, a lot of early Disney and Warner Media, like they did a lot of propaganda films. Like there's movies of Donald Duck saluting Hitler, like not necessarily the best judge, but also you are kind of surprised to see, like, really, that's where you're gonna go with this. Like,
Well,
just
I mean, it just goes to show you the ubiquitousness of bigotry. And like,
yeah,
I mean, you mentioned earlier, you know, the things that you're thinking about doing to combat racism feel like a drop in the bucket. It's always going to feel like a drop in the bucket. Like, because I mean, think of what you're trying to fill here, I mean, racism has been virulently spreading throughout the nation. It's practically seeped into the earth of the United States of America for generations now. I mean, generations.
yeah. No, I mean,
So,
we are a country built on racism, because between, forcing Native Americans off their land, using Chinese immigrant labor to build railroads, build our infrastructure, and then let's not even, quantify the same level of, just indentured slavery that we had for, how many decades?
Really kind of depends on what you count.
Yeah. How it depends on when you want to start counting. So yeah, like this is a country that is just, and like it was built on it beforehand, because Europe and the European countries were not any better. We just took a lot of that and brought it over, and then just kind of, it's one of the few things we kept from our British roots was extreme colonization and racism.
Yeah. And along with it came substantial level of dehumanization and a mechanistic system of dehumanization that remains. That is the legacy of the choice that they made all those years ago. A choice that has been shrouded, so that people cannot even understand what choice was made, what it means, how it might impact them presently. So that is how things can happen, like us being completely ignorant of that word and its usage, right? Because it's been erased from history. Why? Because learning more about bigotry, learning more about historical bigotry, it will question the order that we've so carefully created to maintain racial hierarchy, to maintain systems of white supremacy. And that's what you and I grew up in, unknowingly. Me too. You know, your story of your evolution of race consciousness isn't too much different than mine, because I was taught the exact same thing, right? I was also taught that we live in a post-racial society. I was also taught that this is a thing of the past, For me, I realized it at 6 years old. 6 years old, and I'd already been told the difference between black and white. VHS tapes and PBS specials taught me quite a bit about America's plight. I was walking the halls of my elementary school, Fayetteville Street Elementary School. 6 years old, and I heard a boy told me that I wasn't acting, black. Why wasn't I acting black, right? And I asked him what he meant by that. And he said, well, you get good grades. He said, well, you're not in a gang. He said, well, you don't curse. And he just started rattling off all these things that to him was the amalgamation of blackness. And, the most shocking thing about that conversation at 6 years old was realizing that everything I'd been told about race being a thing of the past was false, but every adult that I had encountered had reinforced that reality, which was a fantasy.
Yeah.
So it was a shocking moment for me to realize all of that and to think, man, so what do I do now? And the answer was to start investigating the problem clandestinely and finding ways to interrogate it behind the scenes. I used to joke, and I could still make the same joke, that if I don't bring it up, then race is not being talked about. I was the impetus for virtually every conversation I ever had on race in my life. So that is really what has inspired me to create this show, to create a space where people can have these conversations, talk about these things, because most people never do. And a lot of people don't ever have to. Really, no one ever has to, you can continue living in a white supremacist creation and ignore that reality, ignore that fact. People do it all the time. But it keeps things the way that they are, and like you said, the way things are right now, it ain't looking good.
No, it's problematic at best.
Yeah. I mean, that is a euphemism of a generation here. Thanks for watching. For access to the full-length conversation and all of the 2-hour-long unedited conversations that I've had on race, click the support link in the description below. Thanks for your support, and see you next time.